The rusted lock clanked, a sound that echoed not just through the gates of Phu Quoc Island prison, but through the very fabric of history. Behind that barbed wire, under the unforgiving glare of the tropical sun, thousands of Vietcong prisoners endured unimaginable conditions, their stories largely untold, their suffering a shadow in the official narratives of war. This was not the experience of abundance or hospitality. It was a descent into a system forged by fear, scarcity, and a brutal political urgency. Tonight, we delve into the untold saga of the Vietcong POWs who survived America's harshest camps, a truth often obscured, a chapter in history America tried to hide. Our goal is to illuminate this dark corner, to bring to light the experiences of those who were captured, interrogated, and imprisoned during the tumultuous years of the Vietnam War. We will explore the initial shock of capture, the brutal processing in temporary compounds, and the deliberate creation of an environment designed to break the human spirit. We will journey into the notorious interrogation huts, where the line between information gathering and torture blurred, and examine the psychological and physical scars inflicted upon these individuals. Our investigation will uncover the sheer scale of the prison system, from makeshift cages to sprawling facilities, and the daily struggle for survival against disease, starvation, and systematic abuse. This is a story of resilience in the face of overwhelming adversity, a testament to the human will to endure even in the most inhumane conditions. Prepare to confront a difficult but essential truth as we peel back the layers of propaganda and silence to reveal the harrowing reality of the Vietcong POWs. The narrative of the Vietnam War often focuses on American experiences, yet a vital, often suppressed, aspect centers on the thousands of Vietcong prisoners held in what became some of the harshest detention centers of the 20th century. These were not conventional prisoner of war camps as defined by international conventions, but rather a network of facilities, both overt and clandestine, operated by South Vietnamese forces with significant American backing, oversight, and even direct involvement. Key to understanding this hidden truth is recognizing the systemic nature of the suffering. It wasn't merely isolated incidents of abuse, rather, it was a pervasive environment of deprivation, psychological torment, and physical brutality. From the moment of capture, often in the dense jungles or rice paddies, Vietcong fighters faced immediate, intense interrogation, frequently under duress. These initial encounters set a terrifying precedent, establishing a power dynamic built on fear and coercion. The camps themselves, like the infamous Phu Quoc or the lesser-known provincial detention centers, were characterized by extreme overcrowding. Prisoners were often confined in tiger cages, small, open-air enclosures barely large enough to crouch in, exposed to the elements and rampant disease. Food was scarce and often contaminated, leading to widespread malnutrition and dysentery. Medical care was virtually non-existent. Beyond the physical hardships, a relentless psychological campaign aimed to break their will. Solitary confinement, sleep deprivation, and mock executions were common tactics, designed to extract information and ideological recantations. The goal was not merely to hold them, but to dismantle their identity as revolutionary fighters, forcing them to betray their comrades and their cause. This systematic dehumanization, often justified under the umbrella of counterinsurgency, represents a stark and brutal chapter in the war's history. The true extent of America's involvement, both direct and indirect, in these harsh detention systems remains a critical, often downplayed, aspect of this historical truth. While the camps were primarily administered by the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, or ARVN, American advisors, intelligence officers, and financial aid played an undeniable role in their establishment, operation, and expansion. Training programs for ARVN interrogators, the provision of equipment, and the strategic planning of prisoner management all bore the imprint of American influence. This wasn't merely passive observation. It was active participation in shaping a system that routinely violated international humanitarian laws. Consider the Phoenix Program, a particularly controversial initiative. While not exclusively a prisoner of war program, its objective was to neutralize the Viet Cong infrastructure through intelligence gathering, capture, and often assassination. Thousands of suspected Viet Cong sympathizers and operatives were apprehended and funneled into interrogation centers, many of which were the very same facilities housing captured fighters. The lines between military combatants, political dissidents, and civilian suspects blurred, leading to arbitrary arrests and widespread human rights abuses. The methods employed, ranging from waterboarding to electric shock, were well documented by various human rights organizations and, in some cases, even by internal U.S. military reports. The long-term psychological impact on these survivors is another key, yet often overlooked, facet. Many Viet Cong POWs emerged from these camps not only physically scarred, but profoundly traumatized. The systematic torture, the constant threat of death, and the forced ideological conversions left indelible marks. Their stories, when finally told, speak of enduring nightmares, deep-seated mistrust, and a lifetime grappling with the memories of their captivity. This legacy of suffering, often minimized or dismissed, continues to resonate in Vietnam, a stark reminder of the hidden costs of war and the truths that remain buried beneath layers of historical omission. One of the most profound and disturbing aspects of these camps was the deliberate denial of legal protections afforded to prisoners of war under the Geneva Conventions. The United States and South Vietnam often categorized captured Viet Cong as insurgents or criminals rather than conventional soldiers, thereby sidestepping obligations to provide humane treatment, regular inspections, or access for international humanitarian organizations. This legalistic maneuver created a vacuum where abuses could flourish unchecked, away from the scrutiny that might have been applied to declared POWs. This distinction was not merely semantic, it had devastating practical consequences. Without POW status, prisoners were denied even the most basic rights: no standardized rations, no proper medical care, no independent oversight. They were subjected to indefinite detention, often without trial, and their families had no legal recourse to ascertain their whereabouts or well-being. This deliberate ambiguity surrounding their status allowed for the implementation of coercive interrogation techniques that would have been unequivocally condemned if applied to recognized soldiers. Eyewitness accounts and declassified documents paint a grim picture of the conditions. Survivors recount being packed so tightly into cells that they could not lie down, forced to stand for days in their own waste. Disease, particularly cholera and tuberculosis, swept through the camps, exacerbated by the lack of sanitation and medical attention. The intent was clear: to break the spirit, to extract intelligence at any cost, and to deter others from joining the insurgency by demonstrating the brutal fate awaiting captured revolutionaries. The denial of their status as legitimate combatants was a crucial tool in creating an environment where extreme cruelty became the norm, a truth that remains a painful scar on the collective memory of the conflict. The political implications of acknowledging the Viet Cong as legitimate combatants were immense, and this too played a crucial role in perpetuating their harsh treatment. Granting them POW status would have implicitly legitimized their cause and their government, a concession neither the U.S. nor South Vietnam was willing to make during the height of the conflict. This political imperative directly informed the legalistic justifications for their brutal detention. By framing them as criminals or terrorists, the Saigon government and its American allies could maintain a narrative that delegitimized the insurgency, even as the realities of the war on the ground contradicted this stance. This strategic denial of status meant that the international community, already deeply divided over the war, found it difficult to intervene effectively. While organizations like the International Committee of the Red Cross did make efforts to gain access, their pleas were often rebuffed or met with limited, controlled tours that failed to reveal the full extent of the atrocities. The secrecy surrounding these camps was therefore not accidental. It was a deliberate policy to control information and manage public perception, both domestically and internationally. Moreover, the sheer scale of the detention system, housing tens of thousands over the war's duration, meant that the experiences of individuals were often subsumed into a vast, impersonal machinery of repression. Each survivor's story, however, represents a testament to the human spirit's capacity for endurance. Their defiance, their solidarity, and their continued belief in their cause, even under unimaginable duress, challenged the narrative that sought to portray them as mere cogs in a terror machine. Their survival, against such overwhelming odds, is perhaps the most powerful and enduring aspect of this hidden truth, speaking volumes about the tenacity of those who fought for Vietnamese independence. The silence surrounding their plight, maintained for decades, is now slowly giving way to a more complete and agonizing historical accounting. The legacy of these camps extends far beyond the war's end, deeply influencing post-war Vietnamese society and its relationship with the West. For the newly unified Vietnam, the suffering endured by these prisoners became a potent symbol of national sacrifice and resistance against foreign aggression. The survivors, once marginalized and abused, were elevated to heroes, their stories of resilience woven into the fabric of national identity. Memorials were erected, museums established, all dedicated to preserving the memory of their struggle and the atrocities they faced. This collective remembrance serves as a powerful counter-narrative to the Western-centric view of the war, emphasizing the profound human cost borne by the Vietnamese people. However, the truth about these camps also created a complex dynamic in the aftermath of the war. While the survivors were celebrated, the deep psychological wounds they carried often went unaddressed. Many struggled with chronic health issues, mental health challenges, and social reintegration difficulties. The official narrative, while honoring their sacrifice, sometimes overshadowed the individual trauma, focusing instead on the broader political triumph. Moreover, the history of these detention centers continues to be a point of contention in international relations. For decades, the U.S. government has faced accusations of complicity in war crimes, accusations that have been largely dismissed or downplayed. The declassification of documents and the persistent efforts of historians and activists have slowly brought more of this truth to light, forcing a re-evaluation of America's role in the darker chapters of the Vietnam War. This ongoing process of historical reckoning is crucial not only for understanding the past, but also for informing contemporary discussions about human rights, military ethics, and accountability in conflict zones worldwide. The voices of those who survived, once silenced, now demand to be heard, ensuring that their harrowing experiences are never again relegated to the shadows of history. The physical infrastructure of these camps, though often rudimentary, was designed for maximum control and psychological impact. Prisons like Phu Quoc, Con Dao, and the provincial jails were not merely holding pens, they were instruments of a broader strategy. Phu Quoc, for instance, a remote island off the coast, became a symbol of isolation and despair. Its sheer size, with thousands of prisoners, allowed for systematic segregation and the application of varying levels of brutality. The infamous tiger cages of Con Dao, small roofless cells where prisoners were exposed to the elements and guards could inflict torture from above, exemplify the ingenious cruelty embedded in the design. These structures were often constructed with American financial aid and technical advice, transforming what might have been temporary holding facilities into permanent fixtures of repression. The design principles, whether explicitly stated or implicitly adopted, prioritized security and interrogation over any semblance of humane conditions. They were built to contain, to break, and to silence. The very materials used, concrete, barbed wire, and heavy iron doors, spoke of permanence and inescapable confinement. Beyond the physical structures, the daily routines within these camps were meticulously orchestrated to inflict psychological torment. Sleep deprivation, forced labor, and constant surveillance eroded the prisoner's sense of self and time. Interrogations were not isolated events, but an integral part of this relentless assault, often preceded and followed by periods of extreme deprivation or physical abuse. The goal was to dismantle their ideological convictions, to turn them against their comrades, and to extract any valuable intelligence. The physical scars of these camps were often visible, but the mental and emotional wounds ran far deeper, leaving an indelible mark on those who endured their horrors. The architecture of repression, therefore, was not just about walls and cells, but about a comprehensive system designed to crush the human spirit. The methods of torture employed in these facilities ranged from crude physical violence to sophisticated psychological manipulation, all aimed at breaking the prisoner's will and extracting intelligence. Beatings with rubber hoses, electric shocks, waterboarding, and forced ingestion of dirty water or human waste were common physical abuses reported by survivors. These acts were not random outbursts of cruelty, but often part of a systematic approach, carefully documented and refined over time. The intent was not just to inflict pain, but to instill a profound sense of powerlessness and despair. Beyond physical torment, psychological warfare was a pervasive element of camp life. Prisoners were subjected to prolonged isolation, mock executions, and threats against their families. Propaganda was ceaselessly employed, attempting to sow doubt about their cause and their leaders. They were forced to listen to anti-communist broadcasts, to renounce their beliefs, and to witness the suffering of their comrades. This relentless psychological assault aimed to dismantle their ideological convictions, a core aspect of their identity as revolutionary fighters. Interrogators, some of whom received training from American advisors, utilized a spectrum of techniques. The infamous Phoenix program, though primarily focused on assassination and abduction, also fed a stream of suspects into these detention centers, where interrogations were conducted with little to no oversight. The goal was to identify and neutralize Vietcong infrastructure, and the pressure to extract information was immense, often leading to extreme measures. The testimonies of survivors reveal a chilling pattern: a calculated, institutionalized system of brutality designed not merely to punish, but to utterly transform the individual, to strip away their identity and their will to resist. The truth of these interrogation rooms and torture chambers remains one of the darkest aspects of America's involvement in the Vietnam War. Despite the systematic brutality, many Viet Cong prisoners found ways to resist, both individually and collectively. Their defiance was not always overt. Often, it manifested in subtle acts of solidarity, intelligence sharing, and maintaining their ideological resolve. In the face of relentless interrogation, many refused to break, enduring unimaginable pain rather than betraying their comrades or their cause. This resilience stemmed from a deep-seated commitment to their revolutionary ideals and a profound sense of national pride. Within the confines of their cells, prisoners developed intricate communication networks. Tapping on walls, whispering during meager meal distributions, or passing coded messages through sympathetic guards, they maintained a vital connection to one another. They shared news from the outside world, recounted stories of their families, and reaffirmed their commitment to the struggle. These acts of communication were crucial for preserving morale and a sense of collective identity, preventing the isolation that the system sought to impose. They also organized small-scale acts of sabotage and protest whenever opportunities arose. This could range from refusing to work, to staging hunger strikes, or even attempting escapes, often with dire consequences. These acts, though seemingly minor against the might of the prison system, were powerful affirmations of their humanity and their refusal to be completely subjugated. They organized clandestine political education sessions, reinforcing their revolutionary ideology and strengthening their resolve. For many, the very act of survival, of holding on to their beliefs despite the torture, was itself an act of profound resistance. Their stories of endurance are not just tales of suffering, but testaments to the indomitable spirit of those who fought for Vietnamese independence, even from behind barbed wire. The stories of survival from these camps are harrowing accounts of human endurance against unimaginable odds. Many prisoners suffered from severe malnutrition, chronic diseases like dysentery and malaria, and untreated injuries. The lack of medical care was not an oversight. It was often another form of torment, allowing illnesses to fester and bodies to weaken. Survivors often bore the physical scars of torture for the rest of their lives: broken bones that healed improperly, nerve damage, and chronic pain. But beyond the visible wounds, the psychological trauma inflicted upon these individuals was profound and enduring. Many experienced post-traumatic stress disorder, chronic anxiety, depression, and nightmares that haunted them for decades after their release. The experience of prolonged captivity, systematic torture, and the constant threat of death left deep imprints on their mental health. Reintegration into society was often a monumental challenge, as they grappled with their past while trying to forge a future. Despite their suffering, the resilience demonstrated by these survivors is truly remarkable. Many emerged from the camps with their spirit unbroken, their commitment to their ideals strengthened rather than diminished. Their capacity to rebuild their lives, to raise families, and to contribute to the newly unified Vietnam speaks volumes about the human spirit's ability to overcome even the most horrific experiences. Their stories serve as powerful reminders of the profound human cost of war and the devastating, long-term impact of systematic abuse. These men and women, once silenced and subjected to a system designed to erase their identities, ultimately became living testaments to the truth America tried to hide. Their voices, once whispered in the darkness of their cells, now echo across generations, demanding recognition and remembrance. While the suffering of American POWs in North Vietnamese camps has been extensively documented, the experiences of Vietcong prisoners in U.S. backed facilities remained largely hidden from the Western public for decades. This disparity in narrative is not accidental. It reflects a deliberate effort to control the story of the war. The official U.S. narrative often portrayed the Viet Cong as faceless insurgents, terrorists, or criminals, thereby justifying their harsh treatment and negating their status as legitimate combatants. Acknowledging their suffering would have complicated the moral framework of the war. The truth America tried to hide encompasses not only the brutal realities within these camps, but also the extent of American involvement in their establishment, funding, and operational methods. Declassified documents and survivor testimonies have slowly begun to shed light on this complicity, revealing how U.S. advisors were present in many facilities, and how American aid directly supported the infrastructure of repression. For a long time, the U.S. plea for and for aid for ARVN. Government maintained that these were purely South Vietnamese operations, thus deflecting accountability. The omission of these stories from mainstream historical accounts in the West served to maintain a particular image of the war, one where American actions were largely justifiable and morally superior. It allowed the focus to remain on the sacrifices of American soldiers, while the immense human cost borne by the Vietnamese, particularly those captured and tortured by their adversaries, was relegated to the shadows. Only by confronting these uncomfortable truths can we begin to understand the full complexity and tragedy of the Vietnam War, and the profound impact it had on all involved. The process of uncovering these hidden truths has been a long and arduous journey, driven primarily by the tireless efforts of Vietnamese survivors, historians, and human rights advocates. For years after the war, many survivors were reluctant to speak openly about their experiences, burdened by trauma and the weight of their horrific memories. However, as time passed, a growing number found the courage to share their testimonies, often through oral history projects and memoirs. These personal accounts became invaluable primary sources, offering raw, unfiltered insights into the daily realities of life in the detention camps. In Vietnam, the narratives of these survivors became a crucial component of the national memory of the war, though often framed within the broader context of national heroism and sacrifice. Museums and memorials were established to honor their resilience, and their stories were integrated into official historical accounts. This collective remembrance played a vital role in validating their suffering and recognizing their contributions to the unified nation. Internationally, the picture was more complex. While some Western scholars and journalists began to investigate these claims, official recognition and widespread acknowledgement of U.S. complicity remained elusive. The political sensitivities surrounding the Vietnam War, coupled with ongoing debates about accountability, made it difficult for these stories to gain traction in mainstream discourse. Nevertheless, the persistent efforts of activists and researchers ensured that the evidence continued to accumulate, slowly but surely chipping away at the official silences. The truth, however inconvenient or painful, was gradually emerging from the shadows, demanding a re-evaluation of one of America's most controversial conflicts. The long-term impact of these camps extends far beyond the individual survivors, profoundly shaping the social and political landscape of post-war Vietnam. For the Communist Party, the stories of prisoner resilience and suffering became powerful tools for national unity and ideological reinforcement. These narratives serve to highlight the sacrifices made for independence and to underscore the perceived brutality of their adversaries, strengthening the legitimacy of the new government. Survivors were often lauded as national heroes, their endurance celebrated as a testament to the Vietnamese spirit. However, this elevation to heroic status also carried its own complexities. While it provided recognition and a sense of purpose, it sometimes overshadowed the deeply personal and often unaddressed trauma that many survivors carried. The emphasis on collective heroism could, at times, make it difficult for individuals to openly discuss their psychological wounds or to seek help for their lingering suffering. The focus was often on what they endured for the nation, rather than what they lost as individuals. Furthermore, the legacy of the camps continues to influence Vietnam's relationship with the United States and the broader international community. The memory of these harsh detention centers remains a significant point of historical grievance, contributing to a cautious approach in diplomatic relations. It serves as a stark reminder of the human rights violations committed during the conflict and underscores the deep scars that endure, even decades after the guns fell silent. Understanding this hidden truth is not merely an academic exercise, it is essential for comprehending the present and forging a more informed future. The call for accountability for the abuses committed in these camps remains a complex and often unresolved issue. While the Vietnamese government has highlighted these atrocities as part of its historical narrative, direct legal or moral reparations from the United States have not materialized on a broad scale. The intricate web of command structures, the deniability inherent in supporting a proxy government, and the passage of time all contribute to the difficulty of establishing clear lines of responsibility in a legal sense. However, accountability extends beyond legal judgments. It also encompasses historical recognition and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. For many survivors and their descendants, the primary desire is not necessarily financial compensation, but rather an acknowledgement of their suffering and an accurate portrayal of history. This includes a clear understanding of the U.S. role in designing, funding, and overseeing the system that inflicted such widespread torment. The ongoing historical debate serves a crucial purpose: to prevent similar abuses in future conflicts and to ensure that the lessons of the past are not forgotten. By examining the mechanisms through which such a system of repression was allowed to operate, and by understanding the political motivations behind the denial of POW status, we gain invaluable insights into the dangers of unchecked power and the devastating consequences of dehumanization. The truth, in this context, is not merely about historical facts, it is about human dignity, moral responsibility, and the imperative to learn from history's darkest chapters. The voices of those who survived America's harshest camps continue to echo, demanding that this truth no longer remains hidden. The journey through the hidden history of Vietcong prisoners in America's harshest camps reveals a profound and often uncomfortable truth. We have seen how the denial of POW status created a legal void, enabling systematic torture and inhumane conditions. We've explored the extensive U.S. involvement in establishing and sustaining these brutal systems, an involvement long obscured by official narratives. Crucially, we've borne witness to the extraordinary resilience of those who endured, their individual and collective acts of resistance under unimaginable duress. Their survival, however, came at an immense cost, leaving indelible scars that shape not only their personal lives, but also the very fabric of post-war Vietnamese society. While their stories became cornerstones of national identity and unity in Vietnam, the struggle for broader international acknowledgement and accountability continues. The deliberate suppression of these narratives in the West was a conscious effort to control the moral framework of the war, to justify actions, and to deflect responsibility. But history, in its relentless march, eventually brings forth what was once hidden. The persistent efforts of survivors, historians, and advocates have slowly, painstakingly, brought these uncomfortable truths to light. This film has sought to inform, to shed light on a chapter of the Vietnam War that demands our attention and reflection. For only by confronting the full, unvarnished truth of the past, with all its complexities and tragedies, can we hope to truly understand its enduring legacy and strive for a more just and humane future. The echoes of those camps and the voices of those who survived them remind us that the truth, however long it remains buried, will always seek to be heard.